Hello and welcome to Press Gazette's latest Future of Media Technology webinar, which is all about newsroom automation and robot journalism. Over the next hour, we're going to find out what robot journalism is and isn't, how to do it right, and please ask questions using the panel on the right of the webinar screen. And if we'll have time, we'll get to those at the end. So first of all, I'm going to introduce our panel. If we can see the panel. They're appearing for me. Oh yes, I can see them all. Brilliant. Okay, we've got a great panel joining us from across the world. First of all, I've got Pete Clifton, who is the editor-in-chief of the UK's national news agency, PA Media. I'll just say hello, Pete, just to check you're working. Hello, Pete.
Yes, I'm fully functioning. Hello, Dominic. Hello, everybody.
Brilliant. We have Amy Reinhart, who's the program manager of the Associated Press Local News AI Initiative, who's joining us from New York. Hello, Amy.
Hi, nice to be here.
You've got a lovely newsroom in the back there, and Pete, I should say, just for the record, has got a similarly impressive newsroom behind him. But it was just so dazzling that the lighting didn't quite work, so we had to tilt the camera around. But just for you have to take my word for it. It looks very, very impressive. Lots of dynamic journalism going on at PA in London as well. And we have Thomas Sundgren, who's a former newspaper editor in Sweden, who's now Chief Commercial Officer of United Robots, which is a company doing robot journalism basically for newsrooms. Hi, Thomas.
Pleased to meet you guys. Hello there.
And just for local colour, whereabouts are you, Thomas?
Stockholm, Sweden.
Brilliant. Okay.
So no color in the background, but that's where I'm at.
We'll just have to just imagine the beauty that's beyond.
Yes. Yes. Definitely.
And finally, we've got Cynthia Dubose, who's the Vice President Audience Growth and Content Monetization at McClatchy, which is one of the biggest regional media groups in the US. Hi, Cynthia.
Hi, Dominic.
And you are I'm sure, Atlanta, Georgia, is that right?
Yes. Home office.
Brilliant. Hearing you loud and clear. Brilliant. Okay, so I'm going to dive straight in. We've not got long, so and I want to hear lots from you all. I thought I'd just start off with a little bit of a definitions round. Robot is a bit of a loaded term. It makes some of us fear some sort of deranged, out of control machine looking to destroy us. Thomas, just explain what we mean by robot journalism, news automation, AI. There are a few different things in the mix, aren't there? And what are we generally talking about when we talk about these things?
Well, I think this is two-dimensional, and I'll try to make them short. One is the fact that we often talk about tech in general, and it's very popular to talk about general artificial intelligence tech without actually defining it and understanding how it can be a tool and what it is. So when it comes to automated content or robo journalism, what the most solutions out there, including the ones I've seen in use, is if you say AI and machine learning, well, people get scared first because it's undefined. It's very popular to talk about AI in different boardrooms or from a lot of vendors out there and companies out there, and that makes it frightening and unknown. When we're talking automated content or robo journalism, I think it's good to understand that almost all of the solutions out there are actually very controllable and formatted and quite most of the solutions for automated company are based on templates, controlled and checked and newsroom controlled templates of a certain kind, real estate content, sports content, or whatever. And they are template based, often surrounded, they're template core based, surrounded by different AI based algorithms to make them more flexible and more vivid when it comes to language output. But they are not based on the core tech of machine learning. There are machine learning techniques out there to generate text from data, like the GPT-3 technique from Google. But most newsrooms and most suppliers, they don't want to apply that pure machine learning tech into automated content for newsroom. And the reason is basically that machine learning is meant to constantly change and learn and change output based on learning. That's machine learning. And that would basically, in short, produce, sometimes it could produce a radically different output format or when it comes to editorial text, because that's what it's meant to do. And most readers and newsrooms actually want a predictable format in outcome, post-game text or real estate sales text. So I think it's important to understand that most robot journalism solutions out there are template-based with AI additions on top. And it is fair to say that this is AI-based text, but it's not machine learning only. So that's the first thing I think it's important to understand. This is not something that is uncontrollable. We are controlling it, and the newsroom is controlling it. And the newsroom can also change the output and control different parameters in the text because it's not pure machine learning.
Okay, thanks, Thomas. I think that's a good starter for 10. So we're generally talking about automation. I think it's fair to say. Is that right? Or does anyone else want to chip in with something else on that quick sort of definitions round? Cynthia.
Yes, well, I'd love to chip in because I don't call it robot journalism at all. I think when it comes to local news, I define AI for local news as information. It's data that our readers want to know, whether it's weather, high school sports, real estate prices, and it allows us to add a layer of information back to what we're offering our community. And so for us, we use the term AI articles. We don't use robot journalism. Our journalists are continuing to create journalism. And that's something that I think we at McClatchy have been very clear about. We don't believe that AI or the robots can do what our reporters do. They're very good at it. A quick example is as Hurricane Ian was nearing Florida, we work with Thomas with United Robots. We launched an AI bot to scrape National Weather Service, create really short articles that were weather-related updates. But our journalists were reporting, and they were looking at evacuations. They were telling communities how to be prepared. They were offering other service journalism efforts. As of now, that is not anything for us that we're looking to AI to be able to do. So we have AI articles. We don't have robot journalism for our local news.
Thanks, Cynthia. I had a feeling that someone was going to say that robot journalism isn't a helpful term, and I can totally see that.
I do agree.
But I can also see that it's so much easier to write headlines with the word robot in it. Just but yeah, I totally get that. It's a bit of a, like lots of headlines, it's a little bit of an exactly. It's a simplification at the best. So let's get into the sort of the meat of the subject and find out. I'd really like to hear just some user cases. What are the latest things that you're all doing, either yourselves or with your suppliers? What are some really good sort of case studies of what's working and what's sort of coming down the line in your newsrooms, if that's all right. And I was going to go to you first, Amy, in New York with AP.
Yep. Hi. AP has been in a great position since 2014. We really pioneered natural language generation with earnings reports. So taking data in a spreadsheet from quarterly earnings and creating articles based on that. And so each cell has an if then. So if the price went up, this is the word or the language that you use around that. The wonderful thing about that is the data never deviates. It is always in the same column, in the same way. And I see Thomas is nodding because that's one of the biggest problems with this, is to find that consistent data to be able to make these reports. And we went from doing 300 earnings reports every quarter to 3,000. And the journalists that we had reporting on this said that they felt like robots actually by doing 300 earnings reports, and they are able to now do analysis. So if a sector increased, what does that mean? The journalists can now do more robust reporting and leave the data to the machines. And really, these 2,700 other companies that were never reported on before saw an uptick in their exchanges. So it's like, it helped the market, it helped companies, and it helped AP deliver more information for its members. The thing that we don't hear a lot about, so AP is in, again, a good position to be able, we're the largest global news organization, we can experiment. What we're not seeing or hearing a lot from is at the local level, how newsrooms are or not able to embrace this. And if you could share the slide, we did a report for the local AI initiative. We call it a groundbreaking report because, again, you just don't hear from the local level. Locals can't experiment because experimenting has risk, and risk could mean failure. And if they fail, they could go under. So what we saw we had 200 local news leaders share their information on what they're doing with tech, if they're embracing artificial intelligence at all. And what we saw is that local and very small newsrooms could benefit the most. The organizations that are least likely to be able to innovate or use this actually could benefit the most. It would increase what they're able to cover, and also increase the audience, likely, because they'll be able to send it to more people. There's a low capacity to take on risk, as I mentioned. There's concern about adding to an already wobbly tech stack. A lot of newsrooms have gone it alone in terms of creating a content management system. They don't have anybody internally to support it, so they kind of exhale, like, you want me to add what now to this? And then there's the ongoing costs, training, and maintenance that are really top concerns for them. They don't have able to retain talent. If they do, it's usually that one unicorn in the newsroom who can fix things and set things right. So what we got from almost 200 local news leaders is this automation wish list. What do they wish they could automate? And transcription was at the top, social media content creation, auto writing, and the list goes on. But the good news is there is a tech solution for almost everything on this wish list. So the question really comes down to affordability for newsrooms. And what we heard from local news leaders, like the people featured here, is that there's no broadband where they are. So why would they innovate into a website, to make a digital footprint bigger? They cover huge territories. So AI could really sweep in and cover that. Many are faced with a multilingual audience. And in Iowa, rural Iowa, they have now a growing Hispanic population that they never had before. So how do they serve that market? There's tons of repetitive tasks, whether it's police blotter items, event calendar listings, that all of this information that Cynthia had mentioned earlier, all this information could be delivered to readers. And again, that's not journalism. The big issue is with staff turnover, is to keep people interested and engaged at the local level to be able to continue to produce this work. And we just see time and time again, they leave very quickly. And just the last slide, when we asked if if local news leaders are confident that AI can take on repetitive tasks, they actually all came in pretty high on the 4 and 5, that they thought that AI could be helpful. And we found that encouraging, that they didn't see that it was this obtrusive thing, and certainly nothing to do with Hollywood and robots and all of that. It really is about moving data and having data make sense to readers.
Thanks, Amy. I like this, the idea that automation providing more comprehensive coverage. I always think about it in terms of speed, but with the earnings reports, and I can see with local press, news deserts, it could be providing a completeness of coverage that perhaps is missing. I have to ask though, what happens to those 300? The people who are writing those 300 earning reports, you didn't fire them all?
No one lost their jobs during that. In fact, people said that their jobs became better, more interesting. They were able to write analysis pieces around what those earnings reports collectively or by sector meant. And to be able to dive deeper. So it's really about removing those tedious tasks. And for newsrooms who are wondering, where can I jump in on AI? That's really not the question to ask. Listen to what your colleagues are saying or your direct reports are saying. What are they complaining about on a daily basis? Time and time again, we heard from news leaders that they would just like to take some of the weight of these daily repetitive tasks off their reporting staff's back. And so it comes down to a lot of government reporting. And what I mean by that is covering meetings. How do you cover meetings? Well, you can use a YouTube video link. You can run a transcript of that link. You can use a summarization tool to summarize what was said during that meeting and identify keywords. All of that can be used to expedite the reporting of these very long and, let's face it, mostly boring meetings.
Yeah.
But necessary for public to know.
Yeah, been to a few of those. Thanks, Amy. Okay, PA. You guys have been at this for a few years now. I'm trying to remember when. You can remind me when you launched Radar, your newsroom automation.
It's probably 3 or 4 years now, I guess. And robots is only useful to us as a word because it helps to make up radar, because we call it reporters and data and robots, and without robots it would be RADA, which would be a bit weird. And I remember talking on stage at some Society of Editors a while ago about how we were going to try and embrace some of this. And Press Gazette's headline that day was helpfully, Clifton predicts robots taking over at PA, which went down tremendously well with all the reporters here, as you can imagine. Radar solves a problem for us in that for a national news agency like us with a lot of regional customers, there's a lot of increased focus, particularly on their websites, around very local news. They'll still want some of the PA national news content, but a regular ask from them was, well, we need more news that's relevant to this town or this area, which, in the traditional way of doing things would be really difficult. So, in a nutshell, what Radar does is, it entailed taking on more reporters. It was initially partly funded by the Google News Initiative, and these data journalists are essentially scanning the many data sets that are released on an almost daily basis in the UK. And it's the reporters who are looking for the interesting lines in that data. So if it's new crime figures, what are the most interesting things around knife crime or any other sort of elements of crime we choose to go after? So there's a definite journalistic requirement there to find good angles. And what they're doing then is making sure the data is in a presentable format. They're coming up with all the different phrases that will help to describe if an area has got a good result, a bad result, it's improved on last year, it's worse than last year, it's the best, the worst in the country, and so on. And then the automation process is essentially pulling together those two strands to give us hundreds of versions of the same story, but each of them relevant to a particular town. So, if you were to look at all the different versions we send to all the different websites, you'll see there's a structure to it that makes some sense, but the data will be different according to the town, and the phrases that describe the town's performance will be according to what the data say. So there's a healthy dose of journalistic oversight and all of that, and that's really important to us. But what this is allowing us to do is to scale up to provide, 300 localized versions on a story like that, whereas we would previously have done one national view. We might have done a couple of breakouts on a particular talking point in one region, but we would never have been able to provide that level of detail for that many different local authorities or towns or health authorities and so on. So in that way, we've now been able to, open up a new front for a lot of our regional customers, and we can provide them with a radar feed. They can choose the local authority areas they want to take the feeds from, and then we deliver that to them on a daily basis. And as a result, we're producing thousands of extra stories a month, and we have half a dozen extra reporters who are overseeing that. So that's what Radar is in a nutshell. It's been very well received, and I think there are some things like when we're in the midst of the COVID crisis. If data is coming out in a set format every day, and we know it is, then actually we can automate the whole end-to-end process. We know that it's coming out each day. Things are going to be better, worse, or the same. The phrases don't need to change, and we can essentially make that something we can be offering to every one of those local authority areas on a daily basis without further intervention. And we have plenty of those going along. That's all good for the volume, but I suppose a classic Radar one would be where we go into a big body of new data, we go in and find some specific angles, and then we bring together the reporters and the automation to deliver, within a reasonably small amount of time, hundreds of versions of stories that are all relevant to people in local areas. People are paying their taxes. They want to know how their education authorities, health authorities, the police, they want to know how they're performing. They want to know how they compare for potholes compared to other areas. And these are all things that probably lots of newsrooms wouldn't have the chance to report on locally. So I think we're kind of helping the overall understanding of what's happening in locations by this interrogation of the data that we're providing. So that's quite a long answer, but that's what Radars does for us.
Very good. Thanks, Peter. I think, as you say, during coronavirus, I think we found out people are actually quite fascinated by data, aren't they? Like local information. I remember being glued to all that.
And as I say, it's it was repeating data. It came out in the same format, and you could be sending out an updated version for every local authority every day. And in the times when people were completely focused on, is it getting worse? Is it slowing down? Is it getting better? Then those daily data releases are quite compelling.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Pete. Cynthia, tell us what you're up to at McClatchy.
Yes, I'd love to put up one slide to kind of show an example of our implementation. We currently are focused on real estate with our AI implementation. We launched last year. We produce 3 types of AI-driven stories in 9 markets. We have weekly roundups of top sales, individual property sales, and then we also produce trend stories, and we work with United Robots to do that. Just talking a bit about how we got to this point, we identified areas where we had an audience demand for basic information. We recognize in many of our markets, pretty much almost all of them, there's a big appetite for timely and accurate real estate information. Then we looked for opportunities to produce content at scale, very much what Amy was talking about, one story versus several a week. We looked for structured data that was available across all regions, which also made the implementation much more feasible. And in this case, that was real estate transactions. The third piece, and probably the most important piece, not even probably, the most important piece, are our local real estate reporters and editors. They have led the way in this entire implementation. They determine what the stories would look like. Thomas talked about templating. They work with United Robots to actually decide how these templates are set up. What is the length? What is the appropriate tone? What data points should we include? And in what order should we include them? And we also do not make the call to publish until those editors and reporters are comfortable. And so they are the ones that give the green light to say, we are ready to begin publishing these stories. And they also are the ones that can hit pause when what is being published might not be accurate or correct. And finally, when we publish, we are very transparent with our readers. We have bylines that show the stories were generated by a bot. You'll see that on the slide. And then we have a note that I also included on that slide that really explains how the information came to be, where the information came from. And we have an email address that we use for feedback. We really wanted to be transparent. And this is how we use AI information to complement our locally produced journalism. We still have real estate reporters, editors. They are reporting on gentrification, big developments, items that are going to change the landscape of the communities we cover. And we would rather not have them spending time looking for the basic sales information. So that is where we are.
Thank you, Cynthia. Very good. Everyone's interested in what their neighbour's house is being sold for, aren't they? So
Absolutely.
you can make that sort of snooping easier for me. I'm really going to be grateful for that. Thanks, Cynthia. So Thomas, you're involved with lots of newsrooms, and I know there's a lot going on in the Nordic countries as well, particularly. So what are the latest kind of projects that you guys are working on that you're finding it's working well in the field?
Well, basically, I think there's so much interesting, threads to pull here. But first of all, I think it's, everywhere we go now, regardless of if it's us or any other company supplying with automated content, what is super interesting and super joyful is that we see that now, talking about what's happening, we see that automated content as one of the solution types for media companies in their transformation. And let's not talk about us or any other vendor or supplier or anything like that. Automated content is now regarded as a strategic asset for newsrooms and media companies to transform successfully, in the sense that automated content is applied to do exactly what Amy, Pete, and Cynthia has brought up. It's supposed to enable newsrooms and media companies to be progressive, to expand, not to take those steps back that local media companies has been doing for years, but rather start taking steps forward to supply communities and readers with more information, more relevancy, and do that by understanding the gaps in information and coverage, just as Cynthia spoke about, and then start helping newsrooms to complement coverage. So I do agree, this is information, utility community information, not journalism, but it does underpin journalism. And going back to your question, I think we see this everywhere. So yes, the Nordic countries might have been a bit ahead a few years ago because, we're a Swedish company, we started in Sweden, but we see now everywhere in Europe, in the UK, in North America, US and Canada, in the Nordic countries, people are starting to talk about this as a strategic value asset for newsrooms and readers. And that's exactly what this solution, in my opinion, should be, regardless of where the tech comes from. So, that's it.
Thank you, Thomas. Just going to put another shout out there for any questions. So we're taking questions in a few minutes from the audience. It's a good question. I'll put this one to Pete and let anyone else chip in. Unless I don't feel that I see a lot of robot generated journalism in my kind of daily reading. It doesn't seem to be it seems to be a long way from being ubiquitous. I think there are a few newsrooms doing it, but I don't see a lot of it around. I just wonder if that's right, or maybe I'm missing it. And what do we think's holding people back? Because it feels like it could be if it feels like an obvious thing to do. I don't know. What do you think, Pete? Is it we still in the very early days in this in terms of sort of take up of this tech?
Oh, I mean, there's an awful lot of it around in the UK from the service that we provide. It's just, it's not it's not labeled robot journalism or AI or anything else, and often it's bylined by one of the data journalists who's overseen the end-to-end process, which has included plenty of automation along the way, but they've put in a fair amount of the grunt work as well. And so they appear to be articles like any other, and they perfectly, they stand the test. We sometimes put in some additional quotes at the end of a story that we've researched and put those at the end of every version so that they don't just look like a set of data with some phrases. There's a comment that gives some context to it at the end. So it feels to me like there will be newsrooms who are using some level of automation to assist in their processes, some of the repeating tasks that they have, some of the work that they're doing around bringing data to life in the way that I've described, and it will then appear as journalism as is familiar to people. I don't think there are many examples where publishers are racing to put up stuff that they're proudly saying this is completely automatically generated and there's been no intervention at all, because for the reasons Thomas mentions, it might not make a lot of sense, the formats might change, and it might really unnerve the readership. So I think it's a bit more subtle than you've described. And I think, there are scenarios where I've spoken to a customer about, we could think about using this radar approach for football reports. And I think if we're already doing football reports that they're used to getting written by correspondents, they'd probably rather have that than us turning it into an automated proposition. So I think there's also probably a nervousness about what would I lose as a customer of yours if I relied on something that was just automated, lost some of the human touch of the narrative that we get in some of your match reports. So I think you need to hold the hand of customers to let them know what it is they're actually getting, and to know that it's being done responsibly with the process is being used to help you, but the net result is something that they'll feel comfortable with.
Okay, thanks, Pete. I was going to ask a question around safeguards, but I feel we've kind of covered that, because I think you're all in agreement that things need to be checked by, you need to have checks in place to ensure that mistakes don't go out. Is that right? And is it always a pre-publication check, or do you get to a point where you just sufficiently presumably those earnings reports, do you want to get those out super quick and then you can change it if there's a problem, or how does it work, Amy?
So 7 years in now, those earnings reports go straight to the wire. A human is not checking them, but when we are talking with local newsrooms and we're talking about implementing solutions for things that don't always have that reliable structured data, we say that AI can take you 80% of the way there. And then that other 20% has to be a human. So we use a transcription service, and transcription is very good. It's not great. It's not always exact. For example, it has a really hard time distinguishing between female voices. So if there are two women speaking, it thinks it's the same person. Women speak in a much more narrow range than men do. And I'm willing to bet the training data has been mostly men, or at least largely men. So again, and if the person speaks with the slightest of accents, it also kind of bungles everything. So I think it's one of those things that the automated transcription services are amazing. If anybody remembers the foot pedal days of the tapes that you had to go back and forth and try and not mess up. So it really is liberating a lot of journalists from hours of that kind of tedious transcription work, but it's not perfect. And so we recommend an 80% rule, that this technology can take you 80% of the way there, and the rest of the 20 is for humans.
Okay. I've got a question here, which I'm going to broaden out into a bit of a more general revenue question, but someone's asked, are you getting a subscription positive response to your current automated stories? If so, what insights can you share? So I guess this is a question about what are you finding that, is this something that's driving subscriptions? What sort of things and what sort of content is driving subscriptions? And maybe I'll just broaden that out as well, as to be a kind of show me the money question. So how does this lead to return on investment? How does it lead to some revenue that's going to pay journalists' salaries? I don't know who wants to jump in on that one. I got Cynthia. I can see Cynthia. Yeah, go for it.
Yes, I'll start there. We are seeing an increase in audience reach. So that's what I'll say. This information and the articles we're producing have allowed us to reach a broader audience than the audience we would have had if, just say, we don't have, these weekly or these trending real estate reports. We're working on high school football. And so what we know, and Pete touched on this a bit, is that, yes, we have stringers for high school sports scores. But if we can, in addition to the stringers, supplement with AI produced articles of scores, of summaries, now we can broaden the area that we cover on here in America. It's Thursday, Friday, sometimes Saturday nights. And so that allows us to reach a larger audience. And so that's what we have seen. I will let our audience watching kind of take that next step as far as what that means for revenue. But for us, that has been great to say that we're seeing an increase in the audience. We've also been able to create new products. So in Sacramento, we now had AI real estate articles. We have the content and the journalism being written by our real estate reporters, and we were able to package that into a weekly real estate roundup. That's now a newsletter that our advertising team can now have something else under their belt to go out and say, hey, would you like to sponsor this? And so we're looking at it. I think you were right to broaden it, because it's not just subscriptions. It's all around. How can you create new products from this? Can you find a new audience from using AI? And then how does that translate into revenue for your publishers?
Okay, thanks, Cynthia. I'll let everyone chip in on this one if they'd like to, because it's quite an important question. I don't know, Thomas, do you want to go next?
Well, yes, and what we see is since automated content, or whatever we want to call it, is now used for strategic transformation and business purposes, we see a growing number of cases in which you can actually drive subscriptions, and yes, advertising too, if you solve one crucial thing here, and that's a subject of its own, namely the distribution of content. I mean, it's just exactly the same thing as for any content, but with automated content, it's crucial that you solve the distribution to readers to be able to monetize. That's basic newsroom and media company strategy, but it's even more important when you talk about automated content. But if you solve this, we have a growing number of cases in which newsrooms and media companies are driving subscription revenue, top of the funnel or down the funnel for retention. So you can do this, and also, of course, good advertising, inventory, and monetization. So yes. But distribution is actually key. You need to start in an easy way and then adjust yourself in distribution and exposure towards the readership to be able to, create relevancy and monetization.
Thanks so much. And I guess for Amy and Peter, you're similar business models. Is that your agency, so you've got subscribers to keep happy. So is it, fairly, if it's helping you to keep those subscribers happy and win new ones, I guess, is that the equation, Amy?
Yeah, I mean, we promise to deliver as much information as we can, and this is part of that. AP produces 2,000 articles a day, and in comparison, the New York Times produces 200 articles a day. And just to say, our remit is enormous in terms of scale and the demand for information. Everybody's got a publicly traded company wants to be included.
Okay. You go, Pete.
As a news agency, we offer a whole range of services which publishers can subscribe to, and then they get feeds of our content. The Radar feed is another feed that they can subscribe to if they wish, and it can be quite specific about the areas of the region that they're in, that they're interested in, and they tell us that, and we can switch on a subscription for that range of localized stories. So I guess it's another string to our bow, and as I say, it's one that enables us to offer a much more localized service in a way that we wouldn't have been able to do to that degree before.
Okay, thanks, Pete. I've got a very good question here. So, how do you avoid penalisation from Google? So, Google did a helpful content update, which part of that was to ensure people see more original, helpful content written by people for people in search. So, and even before that, I think people, I think Google had. Well, who knows what Google does, but I think there's probably an argument that it might not like machine written content because it's too similar. Who knows? I mean, is this sort of content, is it not really a search play, or do you find that it works okay from a search point of view? I don't know if anyone wants to chip in on that on the Google question. Here, Cynthia.
I'll chip in, but I'll also start. I think you said the most important thing, which is, we don't know what goes on behind the curtain. We have not seen any penalization. I do believe there's another part of that, and I was trying to go back to find that also says Google wants it to be identified, which we do, and we feel we do very well with the bot byline, with the footer that we have on the bottom. And also not repetitive. And so if you recall, Amy was talking earlier about kind of having that templatization where okay, it went up. So there are a few ways you could say that. You could say increase, you could say rose, you could say, and so I think what Google is talking about is when we see output that is same exact story, number changed, that's not what we're creating. In fact, I will tell you, last week, I believe, we had a hurricane. So we were talking about the weather bot earlier. That story was #1 in one of our sites through Google. And it was just a predictive, right? Like it was a report of, hey, hurricane looks like it could be in the path. This state could be in the path. So I think there are a few things that when you are setting up your templates, you want to make sure that you are looking to have not every article be exactly the same. You want to make sure that you're being transparent, again, about who is writing and how this was written. And so I think those are things that we do. Again, can't talk about what goes on at Google, but because we do that, we have yet to see that type of penalization.
Okay.
Yeah, I just chipping in to concur. If we look at, well, broadly speaking, what Google does to penalize, automate, or bot generated content, it's exactly that. What Cynthia says, it is repetitive, short text snippets meant to just be put out there in volumes just to attract SEO. And Google are smart, of course, enough and good enough to differ that kind of dirty bot content from automated editorial content as we do it. If you look at the guidelines, I think it's pretty clear. And then number 2, we are continuously testing our texts in different Google tools to ensure that this is regarded as something qualitative and not being penalized. So yes, I would concur.
Okay. I've got another question here. You can probably see it, but it says, does this create opportunities for organizations to accidentally insert dodgy data only to correct it afterwards? I guess, yeah, there's a question there about democratic oversight, isn't it? I guess the fact that we're potentially just regurgitating the data we're given without necessarily interrogating it. I guess that's what that question's driving at. I'll let Peter at PA answer that one, because you're our democratic watchdog.
Oh, well, didn't realise. Well, I mean, I guess the first thing, that the reporters are there to do is to be sure that they are confident about the data that they're dealing with, and if they're not, then they won't be worrying about drawing anything from it. An awful lot of the data sets we draw from are from the Office of National Statistics, so that's a very trustworthy body, and those are often the data sets that we are working from. And I think it would be unlikely in the extreme if that level of professionally assembled data was being messed with in the way that's described here. So, I mean, I would say it's being confident about the sources that we're using, and then having that level of journalistic integrity to interrogate what they're looking at and be as certain as they can be that it's a strong, robust set of data that they're working with. And, you know, again, in the 4 years or so that we've been doing it, I'm not aware of any instance of it not working as we would have expected.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I would encourage everyone using data to consider it as another source, and then you would interrogate it like you would any source. Where did it come from? What are their motivations? Does this feel complete? Do we have a second set of data to compare it to? You know, police departments, it's municipality by municipality. They don't often want to divulge everything they've got. So how can journalists make sure that they have a complete set of blotter items, that they are able to match that with what's actually happening in the communities? So I just think it's data can be faulty, and it is up to journalists and the institutions they work for to ensure that if they don't have a comparative set of data, that they're really looking closely at what they choose to publish, especially when it comes to blotter items. Are you publishing someone's name and maybe ruining their life, you know, or because of a drinking and driving incident, for example, like, and, you know, is that person a public figure? That's a different story. So just to say that I really think that it is another source, and that's how you should look at that.
Okay. We've got a question here. I'm hearing a lot about increasing the volume of stories, but how can AI and robotic journalism increase the quality? I think it seems we need better journalism, not more journalism. Or am I just old-fashioned? I guess that it seems like that what that question is getting at is this a sort of pilot high, sell it cheap ploy? You know, should we be doing less and doing it better, or should we be doing more? You know, I guess that's what that question addresses. I don't know who'd like to respond to that one.
I'll give it a try.
Thanks,
I don't
Cynthia.
know if the viewer will like the answer. So I think, to me, we're creating better journalism by allowing our reporters the bandwidth and the time to create the better journalism. I don't think any of us started down the path of AI to say we were going to create better journalism because we believe that it is our staff doing that. I think what we've all said today is we're creating information. We are creating a volume of articles so that does not fall to a reporter or an editor to try and figure out, so that they have the time to create the better journalism.
Okay.
You know, there's also just such a volume of information. If you think about your own smartphone and how many apps you have that are competing for your time, and if you think about a local newsroom that maybe had 12 reporters at one time and now they have 6, you know, how are they supposed to cover the areas that they're meant to cover in the face of shrinking resources in the newsroom, expanding coverage areas because now there's, you know, the county is down to one news source. So, you know, they're asked to do more with less. And we see that tools that include automation and AI can help leverage the capacity of that newsroom.
That's a great point, Amy. And I'll just add to that. You know, when we started down this path last year, it wasn't for volume. We were looking to build a community portal to have our sites be a destination for all things community. And like you said, Amy, we saw that with our resources, we cannot do that. We didn't want our reporters to be the clearinghouse for the information. We wanted them to provide to that portal what they do very well. And so we had to go out and figure out how can we have that information and bring it into our sites. So, you know, I don't know exactly what the viewer was asking, but I do think that we're also now able to build better destinations and have more on our sites for our readers. It might not be better journalism, but I would say it's a better experience because they're now getting more information when they visit us.
Okay. I'm going to do one more question, and I'm going to ask it to all of you. So the questioner asks, can you share any big wins or pitfalls to watch out for? Unexpected insights you can highlight. I guess this is a question really which is saying to our publisher viewers, if you're starting off on this journey, what are the things to look out for, and what are the big wins? So failing that, just give them one little bit of advice that's really going to be worth the time of them signing in. I'll let you go first, Thomas.
Well, there are a lot of pitfalls to be avoided, definitely. I think that and a lot of success factors. I think that the number one thing to really start out with is something that Cynthia mentioned in the beginning. It is about defining the gaps in reporting that you think you have and that you need to fill to be able to satisfy audience, give them better information, cover news deserts or anything like that. That's what you need to do, because that's the purpose of automated content to a large extent. And if you do that right, and if you find that topic and start automating it, it will lead to business effects from the newsroom, and better reporting for readers. So that's the one success factor. If you don't do that, we've seen numerous cases where we have been asked by news rooms and media companies to start automating, and they haven't really analyzed the gaps. Well, that's when it often doesn't work somewhere along down the line. So that's the number one. There are many success factors, but that's number one to start with. Find the gaps, understand the need among the audience. It's pretty basic, but you need to do it this time too.
Thank you, Thomas. So do your homework, work out where that information gap is. Amy, same question to you.
Yeah, I would. You don't always need a tech solution, but I will say, as you think about what could solve a problem, you will probably discover you have just a bad process. So do not automate a bad process. This review of how you're doing it, why you're doing it, when you do it. When you review that, you really uncover, like, oh my gosh, we've been doing it in this really upside down way for years, and we didn't even think about it. So if you can see this as an opportunity to make the process better, smoother, and get things done beforehand. We had a project pitch from a newsroom who wanted to automate a bad process. She wanted to fix something at the end of the publishing cycle. We said, no, let's finish it before anything gets published. So I think that these can be opportunities to refine and hone a bad process.
I like that. Okay. I'm going to follow that one under sort of sharpening the saw. Let's get the process right first, and that's going to make everything easier. Thanks. Same question to you, Peter.
I would say main lesson is that always remember this still requires good people at the heart of it, that's what's really driven Radar as a successful proposition. There's lots of clever tech that helps to scale up the content that we do, but at the heart of it is a very small group of very able data journalists who still have the journalistic skills we expect here of identifying good stories and putting it through some really robust checks before we scale it up in the way that I've described. So for me, good people lie at the heart of what we're doing. I would agree with all that's been said about identifying the gaps. I think the key for PA is that we've found areas where we're not doing this, and we're adding a layer of content with the help of some really clever technology that we couldn't do otherwise. And I think that's to the benefit of our customers and is clearly filling a gap that we had. So I would be absolutely supportive of the idea of being clear where the gap is and then seeing how that can be addressed. But I would always want to have good, well-trained journalists who sit at the heart of what we're doing in this area.
Thanks, Peter. And lastly to you, Cynthia. I'm sorry you got to go last. You've got the hardest job now to try and think of something that has been said.
Oh my goodness. I agree with everything that has been said. I will echo, or I will add, to let the data guide you. Not AI data, but what are you seeing in your newsroom that could benefit from supplementing? Because it's very easy to say we're going to do AI. You can run out tomorrow and find someone and find a vendor that'll say, sure, we'll automate, we'll do this for you. But make sure you're doing that in a topic, in an area that is going to appeal to your audience. It doesn't make sense to spend the time to automate, to have additional articles if that is not a topic that resonates with your community. So I would say start with your data of what you know is resonating, and then identify those gaps. And everything everyone has said, identify those gaps, have the journalist at the heart of it. Make sure that your processes are sound, but start with what it is that will resonate in your community.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, look, thanks very much indeed to all our speakers. That's been a fantastic session. Really, really illuminating. So thanks to Amy at AP.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Thomas, United Robots, and Cynthia at McClatchy. And thanks to everyone for listening in and viewing in as well. We'll send you a link so you can watch this on demand and share with your colleagues if you think it's useful. Thanks very much also to our sponsor, United Robots. Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you.